What is up, fellow nerds, and welcome back to the Dapper Snapper Gaming channel, and welcome back to How Do I Want to Do This? This is our series where we take a look at all playable options available to players in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, then we rank them on a scale of 1 to 10 and either build them or fix them depending on how they rank. Now today we are starting our talks on the Way of the Long Death Monk, and this is a really interesting subclass that focuses on the concept of death within the monk chassis, which is pretty cool. They're definitely very interesting, but is it good? We're just gonna have to find that out today. But before we do, make sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe if you haven't already. As you can see, most people who watch the channel are not subscribed, so please don't be one of those people. Help us to reach our goal of 5,000 by the end of this year. I think we can do it, but I need your help for us to get there. And of course, the best way to do that is to click the bell so you're notified when new videos are uploaded and share the video with your friends. So the Way of the Long Death Monk takes the monk kit, someone who is normally focused on the serene parts of life, on how to capture the energy around them in the world, and takes that focus and shifts it to the concept of death and dying. And so it takes on a completely different type of monk. Now, of course, there is the shadow monk as well, which we will be talking about here in a few weeks, but this one is specifically on death. And so it's a little different. It's a little different in the way that it focuses. And sometimes you have to be a little careful because this one comes from the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide. We've talked about a few of those and how Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide tried to do some new things and ultimately a lot of it was bad. And so hopefully this one will be okay. We're just gonna have to find out. So let's go ahead and jump in. Starting off at level 3, we get Touch of Death. And this actually allows us to bolster ourselves when we bring death to our enemies. So whenever we knock a creature within 5 feet of us down to 0 hit points, we can gain temporary hit points equal to our wisdom modifier plus our monk level. Now, this is actually kind of interesting in that we can just farm temporary hit points in this way if it's minions. Now, obviously, we would have to go around and expend all of them or replace temporary hit points because they don't stack. But this could be very interesting in, you pop one enemy and you gain these temporary hit points, you then get hit on the next turn, pop somebody else, and you get these right back. There's no limit to how many times that you can do this, and it doesn't cost key. So it's just a free feature that allows you to take this. Now, you may not always be the one that lands the killing blow, so in that way, it's a little bit more limited. But ultimately, you can do this as much as you want. And so this introduces something called the Bag of Rats theory with this specific subclass. And so I wanted to mention this very briefly. The Bag of Rats theory is that you walk around with a bag full of some type of creature that has 1 hit point. And when you need a little boost, you just crush that enemy, well, just creature, whatever, and then you gain these temporary hit points. I think that this is a little campy and cheesy, although technically rules as written, it works. Definitely something to talk to your DM about before you go around doing something like this. And you're definitely going to get some strange looks from your fellow party members by doing something like that as well. But it's something that's out there, just something to be aware of. So there you go. As far as a ranking on this, it's pretty nice. I mean, wisdom modifier plus monk level is going to scale decently. So I mean, you probably have like a 3 modifier now on wisdom, and that may go up as you go. And then of course your monk level is going to get up to 20, depending on how high, of course, you go. So this is not terrible as far as this, because you can just do it as much as you want. I'm going to give this an 8 out of 10. It is restricted because we're not always going to be dealing the killing blow, just because our damage is not going to be nearly as much as a lot of other characters. And so that may be a little limiting. And so that's the only reason why I can't really rank it higher. Next up at level 6, we get Hour of Reaping. And this is probably one of the most controversial features of this subclass. With this, we can use our action to create a fear effect within 30 feet of us. And so every creature within 30 feet of us has to succeed a wisdom saving throw or be frightened until the end of our next turn. Now, here's the thing. This does not cost key. This is not restricted to X amount of times per day. However, it also doesn't care if your allies are within that sphere. So that's a little restrictive in that case. However, there is another point to be made here that you could use this using your superior mobility to run in, blow this at the beginning of a combat, and then run back out. And so in that case, this is useful. So honestly, I really feel like this feature isn't nearly as bad as what people say. It is still restrictive. We still can't just do this willy-nilly. We do have to be conscientious of our allies being in that radius, and 30 feet's a pretty decent radius. So that's a thing, but we can move faster than most other people. Plus we can bonus action dash for 1 key point. So we can really cover a lot of ground to get in and get out and land this effect. So ultimately, I don't think it's as bad as what people think because of the mobility of the regular monk kit. For that reason, I'm going to give this an 8 out of 10. I think that it's decent. I don't think that I can go any higher. I really think that if you could choose which ones that you affect in that area, it would probably be a 10 out of 10. But because of that, you are going to be a little more restricted in when you can blow this type of thing. And so for that reason, I've got to take a couple points away. At level 11, we get Mastery of Death. And so at this point, it's very simple. When we get reduced to 0 hit points, we can choose to be at 1 instead at the cost of 1 key. I mean, this is pretty fantastic, right? Up to this point, we are level 11. And we have not spent a single key point on any of our subclass features. We are able to focus entirely on our stunning strikes, on our step of the winds, on our flurry of blows, on things like that that really make the monk the monk. And so we can really focus on being effective in that way while doing these other features that we've gotten completely for free without using any kind of resource. That feels really nice. And 1 key point is really worth going ahead and just not going down, especially because we're not spending key on a lot of other things. So we have several key points to spare that we could use to keep ourselves in the fight. So I really like this feature. I think it's really good. I mean, I've got to give this a 10 out of 10. I mean, it's really, really good to be able to keep yourself up and not drop anytime that you drop to 0. You're going to be on the front lines, especially if you get up and deal this fear effect and maybe catch some kind of attack or something and you just can't get out the way that you wanted to. This can save your life and it can be spammed. It's just whenever. It doesn't cost your reaction to do this. It doesn't cost anything else except for a key point. And so in that scenario, it's just really, really helpful. Finally, at level 17, we get Touch of the Long Death. And this is a feature that sounds so cool on paper. But is it really good? Let's take a look, see. So for this, when we touch a creature that is right next to us, we can spend between 1 and 10 key points. Then that target must make a Constitution saving throw, and it will take 2d10 necrotic damage per key point that we spent, or half as much damage on a success. Here's the thing. This sounds like a ton of damage, right? And it is, right? 2d10 per key point. That means if we spent 10 key points, we would be dealing 20d10 necrotic damage, which is an insane amount of damage. However, number one, I don't think I ever want to spend 10 key points on anything because I need those key for other things, you know, like not going down in a fight, like stunning strikes, like any of those other things. This is also a Constitution saving throw, which is one of the worst saving throws to target on monsters. So that doesn't help either. And we haven't talked about the open hand monk yet. That is in a couple of weeks. But we haven't talked about that yet. But it gets a feature that's kind of similar to this, but it's less key for basically the same amount of damage. So for what we have to spend 5 key for, it can spend 3. And so for that reason, this feature is just less effective at what it is trying to do. Is it nice to be able to blow some key sometimes because you haven't spent key on other things? Sure, that's fair. But at the same time, I don't know that I want to spend anywhere near 10 key points on one attack, even if it is for 20d10 necrotic damage. they may resist it, they may pass that Constitution saving throw, and for those things, it just makes this a little more limited. So unfortunately, I've got to give this a 6 out of 10. It's just too expensive for what it is, especially compared to what other monks can do. And it just doesn't feel as satisfying, in my opinion, as something like what the open hand monk gets, which we will again discuss in a couple of weeks. So what do we think of the Long Death Monk? This thing is actually not terrible. I know a lot of people out there think that this is kind of trash, and I know that there are a lot of people who think this is really good. And so for me, I actually think it's just somewhere in the middle. I think that the Touch of Death feature is nice, especially because it is kind of spammable. Now, of course, the Bag of Rats thing makes it a little more spammable, and you're probably going to want to talk to your DM as to whether or not this is allowed, because obviously that's a little cheap. But being able to farm these types of regeneration, having these temporary hit points, is going to be nice in helping you stay up. And then if that were to fail, if you just can't land the winning blow on whatever it is, Mastery of Death will get you back up, and then you could just get more temporary HP and that kind of thing. So those two work together really, really well. Hour of Reaping is kind of where people start to dislike this subclass most of the time, just because of the fear effect not really caring who is within its radius. And so that is limiting, absolutely. But monks have more mobility than any other class in the game in general. And so this is going to allow you to be able to get away from your allies, deal this out, and then run away, or at least put yourself in an advantageous position to where you're set up for next time. So for that reason, I really don't think that this is that bad. Is it as good as some of the other monks that we've discussed? No, I don't think so. I don't think it's the best monk out there by any means, but it is also far from the worst. I'm going to give this an 8 out of 10. The Long Death Monk is pretty nice. I really think that it has some compelling and interesting ways that you can tell a story. And I think that mechanically, it's all right. It's pretty decent. So that is all for our ranking today. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our build later this week as we build a Way of the Long Death Monk. And so I hope you guys are looking forward to that. Until then, stay safe out there, stay healthy. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.